Locals at face-to-face games on Tuesday, January the 2nd, right after the new year. We're playing some modern and we do end up prizing out. I'll let you figure out by watching the video how far we end up getting, but let me know in the comment section down below. As I develop these paper games, I included the hand cam, so you got overhead and hand cam and the commentary over top. Let me know if this is what you want to see moving forward. I've included all 3 games this time. Longer video. Enjoy. Round 1 is against Modern Burn. You'll see it up in a sec. My opponent usually plays Murktide, or that's what I played them on last, so I thought this hand would be fine, and then I was kind of surprised when, you know, after Mulligan's Resolve here, they think about what they want to do. I put out a Preordain, you know, kind of get some cards out here. I see kind of a Visions and a land here. Decide to actually bottom both. I don't think either of those cards are relevant here, but then they go land into a Goblin Guide, trigger into a Crab, and I'm like, ooh, this is going to be a fun game. I only have 2 Mainboard Spell Pierces in this list, so this is going to be, again, as I mentioned, a fun time, a terrible time. I have to shock in a black source, by the way, just to play out a Crab. Now, I arguably could have played out the Fatal Push here. I just think like playing out the threats is a lot better. Now, I do attract the Searing Blaze into the Crab there, and then I choose not to block. I'm doing some interesting things here in terms of how I let this game play out. Again, definitely think I could have gone for some alternate lines, but I wanted to kind of keep the Crab out as a desperate blocker against a future threat. I figure they have more than one, and in this case, I'm going to Fatal Push here, and I decide not to take the damage off of fetching for a basic swamp to eventually kind of kill this next threat here. I could have drowned this Swiftspear right here. I decide to block with the Crab. They fetch and grab themselves a mountain. At this point, they're going to cast a spell, and my Crab is going to go to the graveyard here, and after cuts, we see the spell is a kind of lightning helix here. So I'm going to take some damage. Crab dies, Swiftspear lives, and I feel like I can cycle a Fractured Sanity and then kind of find more interaction, hopefully, but fortunately I'm just finding my lands. There's the basic swamp I was looking for, but regardless, at this point I'm just going to pass the turn here and let them commit some mana. This arguably was probably incorrect here, but it ends up being fine. They've kind of hard cast a Rift Bolt. I kill the Swiftspear before it does damage to me, and I'm getting pretty low. I've taken a ton of damage here. Play the basic swamp, and then at this point I have the ability to Tasha's and then hold up the Fatal Push that I found from there. Now, Tasha's actually does not go that far. You'll notice there's a lot of 2 to 3 CMC stuff left in the deck, and Eidolon is actually back in Burn, and that's what makes this matchup really tough right now. It's no longer favored. It's just as bad as it used to be, and with the double spell right there at the end, we're going to go to game 2. Now, round 1 was really quick, and I think I can make my opponent work for the round 3. Now, I have to fetch Shock to play out a Crab. I have to get a black source. I bolt myself, essentially doing some damage, but kind of works out. The bolt takes out my Crab, so you know, like it's like if I didn't do that, I wouldn't play the Crab. The burn spell would have came at me regardless. So play the Crab, play the Field of Ruin, and kind of mill them out a little bit. Bit of an iffy hand here. I honestly think I could have mulliganed, but I kept it because of the Fatal Push, and it ends up working out for me, just being able to kill this threat right now. I Fatal Push that, and I have the Crypt Incursion for the future turns here. So that's what's kind of nice here. They play a Swiftspear, I block. The block actually kind of works, goes through, and they spend a Rift Bolt, which is fine. And on my turn, I'm going to find myself the 3rd land. And I think about, like, how do I play this? Do I shock this in? I think I kind of have to on the basis of the kind of Drown in the Loch being in hand. Now I'm going to let them untap. They're going to Rift Bolt. That Rift Bolt is going to well, before that even goes off, I actually drown because I figured, okay, if they have like Boros Charm and they use it to protect it, Swiftspear can go the mile. So I hit it there. Rift Bolt then comes to my life, and then on their turn they're going to just play out a Goblin Guide, trigger that Fatal Push on top. I'm then going to block. So I'm like, okay, good, I can then kind of hit them with that Fatal Push. After the Skewer comes at me because the Rift Bolt hit me, so that's why it's 1. Then Fatal Push the Goblin Guide, play the Crab. Searing Blaze comes down after a land drop. These Searing Blazes are actually they're working out pretty well here. And at this point I'm thinking like, okay, I have the Crypt Incursion. Do I play this now, or do I get greedy, fetch for a blue, Fractured Sanity, Crypt next turn? How greedy can I get? There's 1 card in my opponent's hand. I look at their graveyard here. There's 4 creatures in there, so I can go from 12 life up to 16. I'm at 4 if you're kind of tracking this, and I decide to cast it out. I don't think it's worth the risk here. I think it's going to give me the turn or the time that I need at least. Now they're going to charm me, and then at that point they're going to spike me. So again, they would have had lethal last turn around. It was a good thing I crypted there. Now I'm going to fetch at end turn. bring myself down to 8 life here. And I hope at this point in the commentary, I hope you're enjoying the hand cam and just being able to see everything from here. I hope that is helping with the viewer experience. And at this point, I find the Fractured Sanity, think how I want to play this. Do I keep the land in hand? Do I cycle this away for some potential interaction? I mean, I gotta go for the win. So we milled them for 14, at least, you know, kind of getting some cards out of there. A lot of 2 and 3 CMC stuff getting out of there, which is going to be good for a future Tasha's if it comes up. They find themselves a Rift Bolt, hard cast it, that's fine. I'm still up on kind of some life here. I find myself a Spell Pierce, which isn't great. Now I'm gonna play out the land here, because at this point, if I find myself some higher CMC stuff, it can be castable. Now their graveyard has more than 20, but I'm just here to check. I believe it had like 28, 29 or something. Viewers in the video can check. I'm going to cast a Visions of Beyond and draw my 3 cards. At this point, I drew some gas, but I got to be careful here, right? Because I don't want to completely tap out for mana and not have the interaction I need, or have to fetch for that interaction. So decided to just tap 1, play out a Crab, and then that way I can hold up a Spell Pierce without having to kind of use up too much of my life if I don't have to. At this point, kind of pass go, and my opponent is just not drawing the gas they need, which is great. I finally found a recurable land, which now allows me, thanks to my patience of not fetching, having to be able to mill them without losing any life whatsoever. Now, I bounce the Oboro, play it again, get them to L, blah, blah, blah. Now, Fractured Sanity is gonna pretty much seal this game off, but it's really Fractured Sanity or Tasha's. I play the Tasha's, they don't have much left in their deck. And at this point, I can fetch and still live for a drown. I have a basic island, more than a couple at this point. They mill out. Let's go to game number 3 as our opponent scoops that up. Game number 3, honestly, we're on the back foot. Look, we're back on the draw, right? So opponent suspends the Rift Bolt. I play out a Crab, and the Rift Bolt at least goes to the Crab, which is nice. That saves me some damage there. But this enchantment, let me tell you, this card is going to go the mile. I can't gain life if they activate it. My archive traps are going to hit me for 5. They cast for free. I play out a Crab, and I have to get aggressive here. I Preordain, kind of look for some threats. I find 2 lands, which is a nightmare. That is not what I want to find. Put that to the bottom. You're going to see that kind of be an ongoing trend here of the cards that I do not need to draw this game. Now, they bolt the Crab. They play out a Lava Spike at my life. So that's 2 bolts that I've gone at creatures I've played, which is kind of nice. Now I see the kind of white source. I'm thinking, okay, how do I play this? Like, I have access to a Field of Ruin. Do I punish them on mana, get my black source here, or do I fetch for my black source right now? And I go for the punish route. This at least is 1 card down. They go to activate in terms of gaining some life, which is smart in case I had maybe like a white source or something, just surprising them there. But nothing here, no Esper Mill. They grab themselves a mountain. We go to some cuts, and at this point, I'm hoping they don't have the white source, but unfortunately, they find themselves a fetch. So unfortunately, the wrong call there. And at this point, I don't have a counterspell for whatever they're going to play this turn. They fetch themselves into a Sacred Foundry. They have the white source they need to cast their Helixes and Boros Charms. I can't counter the Boros Charm, so look, mistakes, I guess, were made, but we'll see if that ends up mattering. I play myself a land there, my basic swamp, pass them through, and I have like double drown up against a permanent, which for those of you that understand Magic even a little bit, I don't think that's actually a good thing to have, right? So I get them to mill 14 off the Fractured Sanity. I can at least hold up 1 drown or kind of fetch for a Spell Pierce if I need to. The drown's better as removal, so if I can Spell Pierce them, but they have so many lands. I doubt I'm going to be able to Spell Pierce. We're just playing draw go at this point, and my opponent's playing it safe. I'm taking 1 damage a turn based off of the kind of enchantment on the battlefield, and unfortunately, that enchantment, as I mentioned, is going to go a long way. I have counter magic against no spells being cast. We're just playing draw go. They're drawing, they're playing lands. I'm drawing lands. I think I've drawn at least 3 to 4 lands at this point, which is an absolute nightmare. No mill spells, no pressure. The Crypt wouldn't even matter thanks to the bajillion mana they have to activate. I play out the Crab, play at a land. They kind of mill some cards here, and at this point I'm just going to pass through. I have 2 fetches that I can't activate at this point, and they are going to think about what they want to do. I'm going to think about what I want to do at this point. Now they actually have 3 spells in hand. They're going to start casting their sequence. Now I'm going to counter the first spell, then they're going to play their second spell. I'm going to counter their second spell. They play their third spell. Essentially, I'm at 5 life. I would go down to 2, and then I would actually take 1 damage off the enchantment. Now, I make a mistake here. I don't know why I ended up fetching. I'm going to do some thinking just to mill them out a little bit. This was the mistake. I definitely could have gone to a 1 more draw and then try to see what I could do from there. But their deck was actually still healthy. I've only milled them for like 20 cards or something. Tasha's would have done almost nothing. I wouldn't have even been able to like get any fetches going. I did have a land in hand, which, okay, right, I would have gone to mill 3, but then the Tasha's would have had to been insane. I would have had to draw into like visions, into like double Tasha's like that. The mana doesn't even work for that. So regardless, that's the end of round number 1. Burn ended up taking the W against me, and I'm not actually terribly upset about it. Like, Burn is actually rather tough right now with Eidolon out, and Eidolon just makes, generally, like, it's one of the best punish cards that red aggro has in this format. So if it's back, it's back. Let's go to round number 2, where Bluetron is going to be my next interesting matchup. Now, my opponent's a great sport about this. If you're the channel, you know who you are. And Bluetron, they were telling me how this is surprise, like, you know, this is going to be a great matchup for me. And surprisingly, as I've reminded them, Bluetron's actually rather tough. Greentron usually just cannot present a threat fast enough, but Bluetron also can't present a threat fast enough, but they have the interaction to just say draw, go, draw, go, draw, go. Now, if you're noticing the list in the description box down below, I don't have Mainboard surgicals. I got my Extirpates on the side. So you might be able to guess how this game 1 goes against Bluetron. I play out my Crab, try and draw out some counter magic here. Notice that obviously, you know, the blue mana is available from my opponent. It's going to be a rather long game 1. Now, I have the Oboro out, which is great. I do have other lands, but the Oboro can go the miles should it need to in the long game. I have some archive traps. I'm hoping they do search eventually, but come on now, my opponent's smart. They don't need to search if they don't have to. They're going to repeal my Crab, draw a card, go to their turn. Now, the 3 Tron lands are assembled. I cannot find a Field of Ruin to save me at all. It'd be really nice for those archive traps too, by the way. Now, they're thinking really hard about what they want to do. Now, Karn comes down. I can at least counter the Karn. That's great. Now, the One Ring comes down, and we end up heading to a bit of a judge call here in a second, but they're going to draw immediately. Let's not jump too ahead of ourselves. So the One Ring comes down. They have protection. So I preordain top 2 cards in my library. I end up going bottom, both drawing the top, and the top is a land. Now I play the Crab and I actually mill them. So this is where the mistake comes in. Now, we were a great sport about this. I definitely, like, I'm the one that called it out as well. I'm like, oh damn, I shouldn't have milled you. So we knew what the top 3 cards were. We called a judge over, and since this is just casual REL, we would just kind of put it back on top and kind of shuffle the library. And then we also resolved the trigger of where I should have milled myself because they have protection, so I have to target myself. So regardless, the judge call went off. And for those of you watching, just for comp REL purposes, this would work as a miss trigger situation, something that they have to track. So it's kind of similar to like missing your chalice trigger or whatever. So it's up to you to track. This would have just stayed in graveyard. But again, I just want to play this out properly. I'm trying to develop my lands. I need to play out my lands. If they're not going to search, I need to play my lands to hard cast my archive traps. So anyway, they put the lands back, they shuffle up, and again, I want to play this fairly. I'm not trying to take advantage of people. I'm not going to be an angle shooter. All right, I'm already enough of a villain playing mill in Modern. So after a bit of shuffling, after a bit of kind of back and forth here, we then go to the fact that, well, we got to continue this game. I have to beat a One Run coming down, and I'm hoping the One Run can actually do enough damage in this game to get me there, because that's also a relevant alt-win con. And regardless, at this point, they untap. They have some cards to look through. They actually end up going through a couple of discard phases, which is kind of hilarious for me, but that also means the cards in the hand are absolutely insane. Now, Tron develops, Tron gets to more mana. I have a black and a blue, but remember, I haven't milled them for that much. I can't counter much. Now, the One Ring replaces itself there. They find another one, not to lose too much life. They cast it, so they have protection. This time we make sure to remember this trigger. They draw a card, and then on my turn, I have myself a tap land come in. I mill myself for 3, doing that correctly this time. I lose a Jace, as you'll see on the kind of the hand cam side of things, which is kind of unfortunate. Like, I think Jace can actually be really relevant here just as a permanent. If it resolves, that's really hard to deal with. Now they are going to cycle, they're going to search their library, and they lament that this might actually be a little bait, but remember, they do have protection thanks to the One Ring. So my archive traps are super dead, and I think that's ultimately what ends up deciding this first game. It's really hard to get anywhere with the One Ring if you just draw the wrong half of your deck. But old mill would just not be able to deal with this card, but new mill, just like 50% of the time, you draw your Fractured Sanities, you draw your Ruin Crabs, and the card like that does not matter at all. Triple archive traps sitting dead in hand, not great. Heck, even the Fatal Push, just not really relevant against a deck that's really trying to Mindslaver lock you. So I don't want to protect my crabs. I don't think those are the things that I'm looking to counter anyways. The crab has to go. I have to like save that for like future Karns, future Mindslavers, or anything that comes down that way, and I have to make my kind of outs there. So I kind of go, I pass the turn. My opponent then untaps with the One Ring on 2, puts a third counter, draws 3 cards, a lot of things coming down. A 7/7 giant land comes down. I'm like, okay, well, the ward 3 is relevant, and that is going to be a good win condition at some point. I then hit them with the hardcast archive trap. They decide to counter it, kind of scry from the top at that point, and that's what I have to do. I can't find a field rune. I can't even like get them to mill anything, whatever, right? So at this point, they're kind of deciding which cards to keep out of their hand, right? And that's what that was. They discard the rest. I play out a land, get them to mill 3. At least I can kind of enable my drown a little bit more. I have some archive traps that I want to cast as well. They ice the crab, and at this point I'm thinking like, how do I work with this, right? So I have to think like, all right, this crab goes, you know, the giant's gonna come at me through the land, like, okay, whatever, let the crab die. And again, I have to remind myself that, look, the Drown in the Loch can't be there to counter the menial spells. It has to counter the hard spells. Now, they actually activate again to take the ring up to 4. That ring is doing a lot of damage. It's done like 6 damage at this point, if I counter that right. But they have 1,000,000 mana. Folks, they have a ton of mana. They can do whatever they want. They're thinking like, okay, I probably have the Fatal Push. The Karn comes out, and that's what I have to counter, right? Like I have to throw a counter spell at that. And unfortunately, because my opponent's hand is absolutely, positively insane, they count out some mana. And I know the counter spell that's coming my way. They're thinking. They tap out for 5 and well, tap out a different set of mana just to make sure I can't pay for this. And they're gonna, yeah, counter my spell. They're gonna scry equal to X, and things are getting tough. Karn comes down, and Karn's gonna grab some targets. I think this is ultimately where I should have just conceded. I don't think I can beat an active Tron or like an active Karn the Great Creator. Really, I don't think Mill can. There's not a lot of Mill decks playing like bounce effects these days, and it's hard to justify it. Like, yeah, you could be playing like Echoing Truth or something. It's not the worst thing in the world, like especially if you're not playing Preordain, you have the slots for it. They're gonna tutor for the One Ring, bounce their own, just so like life isn't a problem at some point. Like maybe I deal with the Karn on my turn and, you know, have a way to kind of work through them. At this point, they don't know what's in my hand. They don't know the archive traps. I'm going to then decide to, well, how do I play this? How do I play this? Do I play the archive trap? Well, I can't, because they played the One Ring. So I have to play out the Tashas. I'm kind of locked in there. So Tasha's isn't great. It's going to hit a lot of high CMC stuff, but they decide to force that. That's perfectly fine. And at this one, I'm going to pass the turn, let my opponent minus again, look for the Mindslaver, and there you go. I just have to concede to that. Going into game number 2, I actually have a lot more options than I did last game. Remember, I have to have the litmus test of Soul Guide Lantern in this next game, and then into the Extirpate for the games as well. I gotta have ways to not only deal with shuffle effects, but also the individual Tron pieces and the win conditions that they may present to me. So we're gonna do some cuts. We're gonna kind of draw our cards out. We're gonna have a little bit of fun banter back and forth, but ultimately we have to realize that someone's got to take the W, someone's got to take the L. So going into this game, my options are Field of Ruins. I got to find some Soul Guide Lanterns. I got to find some Extirpates. So I'm mulligan once here, but I find a hand that's like, okay, I'm like, all right, I can archive trap. I can punish them a little bit here. And then they play a land tapped and pass. I'm going to mill them for 6 to just hyper enable this, well, the counter spell that I have in my hand. And then I can archive trap them like maybe on a future turn or whatever they need to do. And so I can just be patient for the Karn that hopefully doesn't come down, but I will have the answer to. This one, my opponent's thinking, do we remove this crab? Do we just pass and go? And they ultimately decide we're going to kill this crab now, and that's fine. I can't counter this. The crab is not going to take me the mile. The Karn that they might resolve is going to do worse. Now, I draw the Field of Ruin. I'm not going to play it now. I'm going to play land pass, because if I Field of Ruin next turn, I can still hold up the Drown for the Archive Trap or any future spell they have. I don't need to aggro this out now. They go land pass. I draw a card into a Fractured Sanity, which is great. I have some pressure, so I'm going to Field of Ruin, hit the Urza's Power Plant, and then we both look for a basic island. Twinsies on that, and at this point I'm gonna hit them with the Archive Trap. Might as well throw it out. If they counter it, like, whatever. Again, I have to save it for the Karn, the Mindslaver, whatever might come down after. So they're gonna mill the 13 cards. I'm thinking, like, do I cycle this Fractured Sanity? I think I have to, right? Because I have to find interaction. It's not going to be like raw mill at this point that's really going to win me this game. But regardless, they find themselves another Tron land at their end step. I'm going to get them to mill 4. I'm going to cycle myself into a Soul Guide Lantern, which is nice. So I don't know if they have a shuffle effect right now or not. So at this point, I'm going to play out my island. I'm going to play a Soul Guide Lantern, and I'm going to ping out something in my own graveyard. It's just kind of habit where I feel like I might accidentally ping something that they can return with a Karn in the future. And then also just like keep their graveyard counts high for my Drowns in case they're playing like anything ridiculously high. I obviously can't counter like the extra turn Emrakul, like the 13 CMC one, but like even anything more ridiculous, I need to keep cards in there. They're going to hard cast that, and I'm actually going to counter it. I don't think I can give them card density if that's what they're doing. If they're desperate. Now I'm going to Preordain. Look at the top 2 cards I have. I essentially have like 6 mana right now. I still haven't made a land drop. So I actually really like the Tasha's on top. I can curve really well here. So what I can do is I can cast an Archive Trap now. Next turn have 6 mana and cast Tasha's into a Fractured Sanity. So I hard cast an Archive Trap right now, get them really low, and essentially just like confirm the win here, barring like anything crazy. But I have to tap out, and I kind of just have to go for it. And the reason I'm doing it now is just so they don't counter it. Like I'm just saying, like, look, you have to have like some type of crazy nonsense on your turn. They're counting the library up, by the way. It's getting real low, and at this point I'm holding up this Fractured Sanity thinking, what do I do? What do I do if they have something absolutely insane? Because I can't do anything. This is what happens when you just go for the win. You have to make lines like this. Now they're going to draw 3 cards. That's perfectly fine. That's less cards out of their library. They're then going to play the Teleria that grabs cards from their graveyard, and they ultimately end up conceding here. I don't think that was correct. I think they can just like keep looping artifacts back and forth and just force me to have it, but I'm going to Tasha's here and then get them to mill out, and they're just going to concede. So let's go to game 3. Ultimately, if they did put like an artifact back, I guess I could have milled it with the Fractured Sanity cycle, but neither here nor there. They play land, they tutor. They actually tutored on my turn. They thought they were being fancy but forgot how to do this, so this was a bit of a mistake on their part. I don't blame them. I still had an Archive Trap to punish them, but I essentially draw an Archive Trap on my turn. So the double Archive Trap like really seals this game out. I'm gonna play a land. After they're done shuffling, I'm gonna mill them for 13. I have the Extirpate in hand. We're here to lock this game out. Okay, this is gonna be a very quick game 3, I will tell you that. So they're gonna mill themselves out here. I'm gonna Extirpate the one Urza's Tower that they have in their graveyard. I want to do this now because I have the other Archive Trap to cast, or I would have just gone to their draw step, honestly. I just want to maximize the amount of cards that I'm potentially milling. So I grab an Urza's Tower out of their hand, and at this point, looking through their deck, really what I'm looking for is I don't see the Mindslaver in their kind of main deck here, so I'm looking for win conditions. Really what I'm losing to is Karn the Great Creator, so I have to worry about that next time around. I have to worry about, like, you know, future threats coming down, but really Karn the Great Creator is going to slow this down. Eventually, when I resolve this Jace, I can generally beat most other things unless they play like Ugin, but they're not going to get there in a fair way. So Archive Trap, as I mentioned, the second one resolves. They go to their turn. They then play a Steam Vent Shocked In just to kind of force me to work with the counter magic that is already in their hand. On my turn, I slam the Extirpate that I top deck there, and this Extirpate is really going to seal this game out. I play the land, I Preordain just in case they don't concede, and I need to keep working through. I have land on top, which is great. That's my 4th land, and then I'm going to draw Preordain next turn as well. I'm then going to go to their draw step. They draw, and I'm going to Extirpate the Karn the Great Creator. After asking to look at their graveyard and everything, what do I do? Take out the win condition, and they ultimately decide to concede at this point. Like, they're like, reveal the hand, draw through what would I've gotten. But regardless, all in good fun, they ultimately ended up conceding here, and that's okay. That's how the rounds go. Into round number 3, we are talking about living it against one of my favorite human beings, David, you're a great time playing Magic with. I wish I could play Magic more. We're just having some great fun here. I wish I could have the banter out here, but just in case anything like people don't like it gets said, just leave it out, right? I can voice it over. Now they're gonna like forest cycle for a land that they need here, put it in their hand. They are then going to kind of mill some cards here and kind of work through their graveyard, because that's what I ultimately need to do. If you look at the deck list right now, you have to remember that I do not have main board surgical. I only have 2 spell pierces. So really what this is about is how many mill spells can I throw out at them before they living end, or can I just like mill out all the living ends or all their lands or something? There's some small niche cases that you can get away with. I really wish I had the main board surgical, but I have like 11 cards coming in post board, so I'm not necessarily concerned about the post board games. It's just about mulliganing. That's what it comes down to at that point. Regardless though, we are going to let them tutor for another piece here. They're going to keep looking through their lands. I'm going to kind of cycle through my land deck here, look for my Watery Grave tapped, bring that in. And at this point, I'm kind of worried. I'm not finding my spell pierces. I'm finding lands, but I guess we have to mill them, right? We have a crab. We are going to mill them some more, because an archive trap into like a double fetch crab is like pretty good. We're gonna mill them for 6 in total here, but we're thinking like, do we do this now? Do we wait? Like, how much do we want to enable them? And like, look, ultimately, like if I can somehow mill over all the living ends, like that'll be a big W. So I just got to keep hitting them. So 1 living end is in there, and obviously my opponent here is thinking, what do I do if a surgical comes out? Right? Like my opponent's a very well-established Magic player, very great at the game. So that you're going to see them make some certain plays that may feel like misplays, but they're actually playing around some potential interaction that I have and forcing me to have it at certain points. So at this point, they shock in the land here and they actually cycle, and they don't decide to combo off. I don't know, honestly, if they have the combo piece or not. I'm assuming they do, and they're just deciding to go the interaction route, which is fine. At this point, I'm like a pleb. I don't know any of these like it's super expedition arts, so I'm asking like, okay, this is a blue-green land, this is a red whatever land, and so they only have 1 red source. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna field ruin that, because the basic bound that they have in their deck is actually in their graveyard. So if I field that out, that means they can violent outburst. They have to go off on their main phase, which is kind of nice that way. I don't have to worry about any forces coming my way. Now I feel to ruin them. We both go through this little song and dance. I got my little basic. I have a bunch of basics in my hand, so that's why that basic was at the top, which is kind of unfortunate. Regardless though, that doesn't really enable much for me. Again, I don't have like any archive traps to punish them with. I don't have any surgicals to work with or any spell pierces. Unfortunately, I just have a visions to go off with, and they definitely have like more than 20 cards in their graveyard at this point, and we are just gonna have to wait to interact. There is 1 grief in their graveyard, and that is something that I have to worry about. So the visions is kind of nice, because if they do go off with living end, I can visions and maybe just have a density of spells left in my hand to then just kind of play multiple spells a turn and maybe mill them out for the rest. Maybe draw into more archive traps, into a field of ruin. Like there's still ways to beat a living end if you've milled out enough cards. So I wouldn't be too afraid. You have to evaluate when you need to concede, when you not. Like where you can play through certain pieces of interaction. Now opponent wants to think about how they play around this, right? Like, do I have a spell pierce? Do I have some type of stifle effect, or do they have a mainboard mystical dispute that they want to play as well? They're going to ultimately decide to actually play out a land here and then go for the combo, which makes me think they have the mystical dispute, or they're playing around something, some type of mana. Maybe they need to cycle through if I'm able to deal with the living end, but they need to force me to have it, right? So they're sizing up their land here. They take some damage off the shocked land, and then what they're going to do is, like I said, they are going to combo off. They're going to ultimately go for the living end play here, and in response, I'm going to hit my Visions of Beyond before that grief enters the battlefield and starts hitting me for anything here. Now I draw Fractured Sanity and some more lands. I draw Fatal Push, which is also just not great at all. This is one of those situations where I kind of wish, like in the old days, you played mainboard Damnations, and those were actually like pretty sweet. Like you could like randomly find like 1-ofs in your deck, and maybe like a mainboard Damnation would have been a great, insane top deck here. So regardless though, they're stacking their triggers. That's essentially what they're doing there. The far left side on their side is just no triggers, the middle is the food, and they're going to trigger things this way. So they're going to rearrange the top 3 cards on my library. I didn't know this could actually target opponents. It's like kind of insane that way. So it rearranges the top three. Spoiler alert, they're going to give me a land on top. Then they're going to grief. They're going to take out the Fractured Sanity, which is correct. And then they're going to kind of target the rest, like the other triggers at me the same order, which is fine. There's stack resolves. I look at the fact that I have a land, and I'm going to concede. I can't beat that. But again, going into this game too, I have so many sideboard pieces against this matchup. I'm not concerned. I have a Soul Guide in hand. Honestly, I probably could have mulled to a better hand, but I'm like, this isn't a bad 7. Like, it's got some crabs, it's got an archive trap. I can punish them early. Like, I can actually aggro out a bunch of stuff here. So I decide, you know, kind of mulligan, put that card at the bottom. This wasn't mulligan, it wasn't a 7. The first hand wasn't that great. There was just no interaction whatsoever. I play out the crab. They do some cycling, try and look for some lands. You're going to notice that they are going to, spoiler alert, struggle on some lands here. So at this point, I'm going to play out another crab, and then I'm going to play out a land, get them to do some milling. And at this point, they're just going to like respond and do a bunch of searching. So they're going to first get themselves a land, and they're going to land search to grab another land on their side or try and find something. But no, they're gonna bring that land in tapped. And at this point, I'm like, okay, if they have a Force of Vigor, if they have like a Foundation Breaker and they play it next turn, I think that's fine. Like, I have to play out the Soul Guide Lantern. I have to make them have it. And honestly, the Force of Vigor and like the Foundation Breaker, that's like the best case scenario. A worst case is Force of Will, like not Force of Will, Force of Negation. And so they don't have the Force. The Soul Guide Lantern resolves, and I end up pinging out like a random card out of their graveyard. Sorry, like a land, a basic land, because the rest of it is actually relevant if I drop Crypt Incursion or if I draw an Extirpate. Like, there's moments where the non-creature spells matter if I keep drawing Extirpates and I need to take out like raw cards out of their deck, enablers. So I find the Crypt Incursion though, which is absolutely insane. I play out my last land and go to 1 card in hand with the Crypt Incursion. Now I'm gonna mill them out for 9 cards per land drop. The triple crabs are going absolutely insane. Now on their turn, they're gonna grief me, and they're gonna take out that Crypt Incursion. They laugh because that Crypt Incursion is absolutely insane. End step, I'm gonna fetch and grab myself a tapped Watery Grave. Gotta spread out my mana in case I need it. They're gonna mill another 9 cards, and you notice how at this whole time they haven't played another land. Yeah, remember what I said at the beginning of the game. They're gonna struggle a little bit finding some lands here, and that's ultimately gonna be why I can find this W. On my turn, I draw myself something sweet, a Fractured Sanity, get them to mill 14 cards. They are just not finding what they need. And really what I need though is, like, if they have an endurance, I actually need to find a counter spell. And they also, by the way, they make me flip up the last card as a meme. Again, we're just having a good time. I wish I could give you this audio. It was a great time, but regardless, I need to find a counter spell. So I actually find myself a Preordain, which then draws me into a Drown plus a Crab, which is actually fantastic. The Drown pretty much seals this. I bottom the Crab because it's useless here. I need some land drops, and the Drown again seals this because I can counter the endurance. Regardless of what they play, if the Foundation Breaker comes down, I can still, like, in response, hit the Soul Guide Lantern. I find myself another crab, milled them, or a land, milled them for a bunch, and then let's go to game number 3. Now, in this game, again, I'm on the draw, but I'm not worried. 11 of my sideboard cards come into this matchup. They don't have much. They have to force me to have it. I have a Spell Pierce, Soul Guide Lantern, and a Crypt Incursion. Folks, this hand is absolutely, positively insane. Now I can actually keep this hand because the colorless source is fine because they cast the Soul Guide Lantern, so I'm not completely worried about that part of things. But I do missequence here a little bit. Honestly, I could have just played out the colored source first. I actually decide to play out the Field of Ruin for some reason. They're looking for lands, by the way. Like, they fetch and they grab like a land. I played out the Field of Ruin. Again, misplay. I don't really need to play this land. I could have just played the color source, but it ultimately ends up working out. That's completely okay. So on my turn, after they do some searching, they're kind of looking through, they're grabbing themselves their second land. They don't have any trouble drawing anything. They pass. I draw my card. I play out my colored source here. I play the Soul Guide Lantern out, and I have the Spell Pierce backup. That's really what I'm playing that out for. I'm going to ping out the land, not the creature, because the creature is going to be very relevant. And at this point, they're going to go to their turn, and they're thinking, like, how do I play this out? Do I stop the Soul Guide Lantern? Do I force it now? Do I pass back? Do I play a land go? They're gonna draw. And then that land is in their hand. They're going to play it tapped, so they're not going to combo this turn. They're going to play the Foundation Breaker on the Soul Guy Lantern. I'm actually going to crack it to draw a card. I don't need to, like, they're going to order the triggers in such a way where the Soul Guy, the Foundation Breaker is like still on the stack, so, you know, just be irrelevant there. But the one card is actually more valuable to me than just like pinging out the one creature that they have. So I'm going to fetch Shock. I'm going to lose some life, and then I'm going to, as I mentioned, just redraw off the Soul Guide, find another card, and which is nice. I actually find my third land, which is very relevant, into a Preordain. And at this point, I'm actually feeling pretty good about how I've drawn things. Now, I'm going to play out the Crab. I'm going to get them to mill 3. I could have done this in a different order, honestly. Like, it just doesn't mill them any cards, though. So that's what I have to be worried about. I'm going to play that and pass. I'm going to hold up the Spell Pierce. I'm going to make them just have it. I have to make them just have it. I'm not in an ideal place, but if I untap, I win. That's it. If I untap this game, which I do, I pretty much win the game here. So at this point, I'm going to actually hit my field. I'm going to hit my my land here for some mana and what is it? Preordain first, because my Field of Ruin can actually bounce my Oboro if it needs to. So return my land to my hand, play that, mill them for a bunch here, then hit my Preordain. Right, which you know, well, I don't actually need to hit my Preordain. Sorry, I'm gonna hit my Extirpate and my Spell Pierce. So I can Preordain next turn. But this is a good example of how you can actually turn your Field of Ruin and your Oboro into mana. I've done a short about this a while ago, but it's a really cool interaction just to have in this deck. I was able to kind of turn a colorless moment into like 2 colored mana, which is important. And really at this point, they have the Living End in their graveyard. I go to their draw. I'm going to Extirpate the Living End, which they can't interact with at all. And really the game's not looking too good for my opponent at this point. Like, they do have to just play out a bunch of threats and like work through the game that way, but they do have a stacked hand. They can still find their other endurances and their other threats, and they do actually have a fair hand here. Like, that Mystical Dispute is relevant if they start grinding me out of this game. They didn't like sideboard into any rhinos, by the way, just in case if anyone's curious going through the deck list right now. You can kind of see it in the hand cam, but regardless, grab the other Living Ends. There's only 3 copies, I believe that was the discussion that was being had at that point, but regardless, all those copies are out of there. They shuffle up. I have the Spell Pierce now for heck, like the Violent Outburst that they might use to boost up their creatures, or the Mystical Dispute that we might get into a war with. They play out their 4th land. They play, you know, they slowly start reviewing their whole deck. They're like, no, I'm not gonna do that. Like, I know your whole deck, you're good. Just shuffle up. So we're gonna untap, and now we're going to hit him with the Preordain. Now I can kind of just start grinding out. I'm going to play my Crab out, play my Crabs out. And then what I'm going to do is they're going to Mystical Dispute that one. I'm going to bounce my Oboro, play my Oboro, and then I'm going to get them to mill some cards. Preordain at this point, there's not much that I need to Spell Pierce at this point. Like I can't Spell Pierce an Endurance. So we're going to bottom some cards. We find some very good Magic cards. Let's just say we find some very good Magic cards. We find a Soul Guide Lantern, which is actually very good. They go in for some combat. I take the damage. I'm not really worried. They Endurance their whole graveyard back, but I'm like, I'm sitting pretty with 3 Crabs and a Oboro and a Spell Pierce and a Crypt. Like, I'm Gucci, but we're going to start drawing some ringer lands, by the way. So at this point, I actually like audibly say it's about to get crazy. I should have kept in the audio for that. But yeah, we milled them for another 18 cards. That Endurance did absolutely nothing. And while they're tapped out, while they have no counterspell, I'm going to Crypt them now. I actually go up to like, I think it was like 50 life or something. It was like 47 or 48, just some like ridiculous amount that they can't deal with. So yeah, just an ungodly amount of creatures. I'm sitting pretty. Like, I'm perfectly fine here. I play at the Soul Guide Lantern, force them to have an answer, and ping out another card from their graveyard. They go to untap. The first thing they do is swing, and I'm like, all right, take 5. This is a joke at this point. And they have like literally almost 0 cards left in their deck. Like, do you want to see the rest of your deck? No, I'm good. Untap, I draw myself another fetch. It's actually like working out so well here. I'm gonna fetch, get them to mill another 18 cards. This game's over. I didn't need to wait on my Crypt, by the way. You definitely just want to cast it there while they don't have the counter magic available. Force them to like have a force or something. Just do it while they're down, get the life that you need. And at this point, I'm good. I don't need to do anything else. This game is inevitable. I'm going to Field of Ruin to get another landfall trigger out. They have their basics gone. They're thinking about what they do at this point. They're like, do I just concede? They're like, this game is pretty much over at this point. But hey, That's what happens. That's how FNM draws itself out. Not FNM, it's like TNM, Tuesday Night Modern. But regardless, I crack out my Soul Guide Lantern, exile their graveyard. They have one card left in their library. This game's over. We just start going through some semantics at this point. Like they're gonna cast on their upkeep. They go to cast that to look at the last card in their deck. They start shuffling it around and they're like, what do I do? How do I win? How do I win? And then they ultimately put the card in their hand, shake off. That's the games.